Hey everybody, so welcome to my presentation on how to become an instant expert on women and climate change, or you can adapt this process to any other issue that you want to become an expert in. Of course, when I say expert, I don't mean teach a course or get your PhD in the issue. I mean be able to talk to media about it, answer a few questions, speak out at rallies, tell people what to write on signs, lead chants, etc., so that you have some information that you can use to inspire and inform others. And this is going out to all my sisters, volunteer sisters for women's marches that are happening on January 18th. Around the world, and I hope you have a great women's march. And if you're seeing this afterwards, I hope you already had a great women's march. My company is called Kathy. I'm Kathy McNally of womenspeakup.org. So I'll give you my email address a few times. But if you want to write to me and tell me anything in response to this video, that would be great. And I am at Kathy, Cathy, at womenspeakup.org. And I'm going to divide this video up into several short videos, about 5 minutes each, so that it's easier for you to watch. And this is my first time doing an official screencast where you see this little picture of me in the screen. So it might not go perfectly, but it'll be adequate. So I'm a media volunteer for my local women's march in Western Mass, Pioneer Valley Women's March. There's our logo. And my job is basically to get press releases written, send them out, make sure we get coverage, and to arrange interviews, this is key, for other people to talk about the Women's March. I have a confession to make. I was talking to one of our March directors, Rachel Maiori, and Rachel Maiori was one of the co-founders of the Women's March in Pioneer Valley in 2017. And we were talking about who was going to go and speak to the media. And she said to me, "Why don't you go on the shows, Kathy?" And I gasped. "Ah!" But it really was weird that I gasped in fear of going on the talk shows or other interview shows because Rachel and I met at the Women's March Convention in 2017. And I was there to lead a workshop, one of the most popular workshops, they tell me, about making your talking points sticky. So that's a specialty of mine, is how to make things stick when you're presenting or speaking. And my room was packed there, and that's where Rachel and I met. So she knows me as somebody who helps people speak better. In addition, I've got this company called womenspeakup.org, where I help women, activists, politicians, people at nonprofits, corporate people, all sorts of people become better speakers. And I have another company called How to Say It Better, which teaches anybody how to say anything better. So I should be fairly comfortable. And finally, get this. I'm a stand-up comic. I do things like this. I wrapped myself in saran wrap. I've also wrapped my stomach in duct tape and all manner of things to get a laugh and make fun of those weird Spanx products that they have on Facebook all the time. So I shouldn't be too shy. But the truth is, your worries are my worries, right? I feel like, oh, I'm not qualified. I don't have a PhD. But you know what? I don't need to have a PhD. I only need to learn a couple of things. And that's the truth. And that's what scares us. We think we have to know everything, and we don't. I don't know very much about this issue. Well, guess what? I can actually learn a couple of things pretty fast. Finally, I'll sound stupid if they grill me. Like, what if I feel like, oh, I'm going to go on Sean Hannity or Bill O'Reilly show? But you know what the truth is? That's not happening in local media interviews. They're pretty pleasant, they're pretty positive, they want to have some inspiring and informative information, and I can do that. However, if I were to go on a show where there would be some pushback, you know what? I could figure out my plan for that and I could prepare for that. So, one more thing I learned that really made me eager to train myself to be an expert was this article that I read in the Yale Climate Change Communication Project. This is a really excellent project at Yale. They do a lot of good work, and I'm going to show you some more of their research later. By the way, when I show you research at the end of the presentation, I'm going to have all these pictures with all the links. So you don't have to find it yourself. I'll give you the link so you can go and do your own research. So what I saw in this article was that there's different ways women and men feel differently and talk differently about climate change. Okay, so maybe we know less facts. But we tend to be less certain of what we do know, even though women, research shows, have a much more accurate understanding of the risks and threat from climate change. So that made me feel like, gosh, I am going to make myself more certain of what I do know, and I'm going to know a few more things. So I'm feeling better, but what's next? So watch the video below, click the link below or above, and watch. When we last left, I shared my desire to become an instant expert on climate change and women, at least the best that I could. So let's see where we are. I want to go from this to this. And how am I going to do it? I am going to use my media coaching tools on me. I work with people to do media interviews, right? I've told you about that. So I'm going to do those things that I do on myself. Here we go. So here's my media coaching tools. First, I help people figure out what their win-win is. And I'll tell you exactly what I mean by that. I figure out what I, or you, the speaker, need to get out of this interview or this presentation. What do you want? What's your end goal? So that I call that the WIN, what I need. The second is to figure out what does your audience need? So I'm thinking of you. What do you, my message receiver, need? And that's WYN, what you need. And that is win. So once you have those, and it takes, a few minutes to figure out, I'm going to show you one way I did it. Once you have those, you can do I'll put myself over here. You can do the next step, which is to create talking points, which aren't just talking points, but which are what I call easy R. And easy R means easy for the audience to receive, take them in, remember, and repeat. That is the most important thing. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. So here's my win-win for this particular thing, talking to the media about climate change. First of all, what I need is I need to give you a reason to come to the march. And I want to use climate change as at least one of those reasons. The second thing is I want you to understand a little bit about that there is a connection between women and climate change, which is different than men and climate change. And third, I want you to feel and believe that your marching makes a difference. So does marching make a difference? Does physically going down and putting your legs one in front of the other? It's not that. It's your connection and contact with other women. It's your inspiration by being together with people and hearing lots of awesome speakers. And we have at our Women's March an activist fair, which means you can go to this fair and see lots of tables that are going to help you figure out how to get involved. So marching is good, but we want you to get involved after, but marching will help you with that. The second thing I want to think about is the WYN. What do you need out of this interview when you're just listening on the radio or television? You need a reason to get out on a cold Saturday and go downtown, park your car, deal with crowds, and march. The tendency may be to stay home, do chores, etc. I need to give you a reason to get over that. The second thing is I want you to feel a little bit smarter about women and climate change. We like to feel smarter about something, and none of us have time or the inclination to go to the library or sit in front of a computer all day. So I want you to feel like you have some insight, and I want you to feel like you can share those insights. That's key. The third thing is to believe that you have an opportunity to act for women and climate change by marching. And I've talked about the role of marching. So I want you to feel like you want to do it, you want to share what you know, and it makes a difference to do it. All right, let's now talk about, and I'll put myself down here, what happens with this Easy to receive, easy to remember, easy to respond. So there's my logo for my Women's March there, Pioneer Valley. And you can see we might have 3 points, right? We might have 3 points about the Women's March, or I might have 3 points that I want to make about women and climate change. That's my particular focus here. But whatever you have, you probably have 3 points at the most you want people to remember. So what we want to do is make those points easy to go right into the brain and then to lodge inside that brain, to stick there so they're sticky. Then we want you to be able to repeat them. So we want to make it as easy as possible for you to feel smarter, for you to share your wisdom with others, and for you to have to do as little work as possible. Here's what makes things easy to remember, repeat, and retain for most people. First of all, the news or points should be surprising. People pay more attention to what they're surprised by. It doesn't have to be all surprising, because that would be too much surprise, but you want it to be adequately surprising. You want some news there, right? Like a newspaper. The second thing, and this is crucial, it's got to be visual. You have got to be able to make pictures of what you're saying so the audience can make those pictures in the brain. So it's crucial that you have concrete imagery when you're talking rather than abstraction. And I'm going to show you an example of that later. Also, it's simple, and this is extremely important and challenging with climate change. Must be simple. If not, we have mental shutdown and nothing will get through. It's got to be relatable, which is a little bit of the challenge when we're talking about international global change, problems in Africa, problems in Asia. They're not always similar to problems that we might have in the United States. So we're going to talk about how to make things relatable. And finally, it feels urgent. So I am going to try to create points that will address all those, and I'm going to then massage them so they're even better. And I want you to come along with me on this process. When I work with clients, they know their subject matter. I do not. So for my clients, they have to just think about all the stuff they know and then put it together in a package, and that's what I help them do. But I don't have anything, so that means I have to go and Google. Click for the next video and you can see my research journey. What happens next? All right, everybody, so we're ready to dig into the research. I'm going to divide up this research part into 3, I think, shorter videos. If you want to just peek in at the end of the last video or the end of this whole series, you'll find out the key points I have. So you don't have to follow me through the research. But if you want to, because if you want to do your own research, you might find it interesting. So the first thing I did is go to Google, of course, and put in feminism and climate change. Now, when I did that, I did get a lot of hits, and I got a lot of things with initials, which I'm going to tell you the truth, sort of intimidated me. But then I also found something from Georgetown University. They're smart there, right? So here we are at the Georgetown article, and this is something that you're going to find, and I want to warn you about an article like this. So as we look at it, we're going to see that we're going to have some words that are fairly abstract. So we see unencumbered disproportionately, exacerbated in settings, rapid onset disaster. We have a lot of abstraction here. This is an extremely academic report, which means that there are absolutely no pictures that I can use. There's no visuals. It's all extremely abstract. When you find information like this, it's not going to be very useful. There could be good information in the rest of this report. No disrespect to the folks at Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. But this intro is so abstract that it tells me, no, I'm not going to go with this. I'm going to move on. Change my search words because feminism would bring me, the word feminism would probably bring me to more academic articles. So I changed it to women and climate change. And let's look at what happened here. With women and climate change, I found something really great, a fact sheet from Oxfam. Fact sheet, climate change, and women. This is perfect, turned out to be a great resource. If you see things like fact sheet, in fact, I would probably Google those next time. definitely you want to go there. So let's look at that. Oh, and let's look at some other stuff we had. I found something from Teen Vogue. If you find popular general readership magazines, they will generally have stuff that you can also use. So as it turned out, that article was not so great because it turned out they were writers talking about women telling their stories. They didn't have a lot of visual facts. But I found something else too that was called We Can, which I just like the name of it. So I looked at that. This is the Oxfam fact sheet. You can tell that it's built for general readership because it's got lots of blocks of text. It's beautifully organized. It's meant to be used. So I'm going to focus on this brown box here and notice what I've got here. Climate change affects women because they are usually the main food producers. Because of no rain, girls have to drop out of school. Why do I like all that stuff, even though it's horribly dire? Because it gives me pictures to work with, which is what I desperately need rather than just abstraction. So this turned out to be a great resource. This Wired magazine, which is, general readership, I knew this would be good because of the title. It says, Climate Change is Brutal for Everyone, but Worse for Women. What that title tells me is that the article is going to be very direct. It's got two statements there, and so it's not going to be abstract. So let's look at what I see there. This article is filled with stories about climate change and women around the world, but it's got this one story about East Africa. And in this story, it's a fact about men having to walk much farther, 10 times farther to find water for their cattle. Because of that, women cannot go with them so far and milk the cattle and then get the milk and the money from selling it. So that has changed their economy and their life completely. So that's another great piece. In this, climate change impacts women more than men. This title also tells me it's going to tell me stuff. I've got this fact, and this is not a fact that is hidden. We might have heard this, but it's very good for being bad, and I'll tell you why. 80% of the people that are displaced around the world from climate change are women. Here's what's so important about that number. It's a huge number. It's completely out of balance to population. So it's a number that it's a startling statistic, which fits in our need to make things surprising. It also allows me to make analogies. So I'm going to make analogies so that people here in New England can picture that and see what that would be like if 80% of the women from your church or school disappeared. So that's a very useful thing. So here's my first two facts. I'm keeping my facts on these digital sticky notes here. We've got women, 80% of those displaced. Climate change means drought, which means certain things. So this is my collection of sticky notes, and let's move on. I was really glad to find this article about Australia because Australia is very current and it's right in the news now. And we're seeing lots of images from Australia. And some of the interesting images we're seeing from Australia are of animals because of their unique ecosystem and the unique animals there. And we all respond emotionally to koala bears and one of those other kangaroos. So I'm going to use that as part of an analogy as a visual. But I learned that in this article about domestic violence that women and children are disproportionately affected and 14 times more likely to die in a natural disaster on a global scale. So that was amazing to me. Again, a much more startling statistic than I would have expected. So now I have a couple of more things in my fact sheet. Women and children 14 times likelier to die of natural disasters than men. And this other piece that I learned from this article, that domestic violence shoots up, and some research in New Zealand shows that it shot up at one place 300% at a domestic violence center. And I'm sure we're going to see that in other places around the world. So that's sort of around the world. Now let's see, in my next part of the video, I'm going to show you what we can find more closer in our own neighborhood. Hey everybody. So when I last left, we had some worldwide research, and this is from that Oxfam fact sheet that I loved. But this helps me to get a little bit closer to the United States so I can talk about issues here in the United States. And has this very interesting statistic about displacement in the US, and that in Katrina, after Katrina, 83% of the poor single mothers in New Orleans were displaced. That means they did not go back to their homes. They did not go back to their neighborhoods. They did not go back to their natural geographic networks that they had. And they ended up living elsewhere, moving maybe to Houston or other places, going with family, going to shelters, going to FEMA camps. That's an enormous amount of people that can't get back to a community. So, and ironically, those people who couldn't get back in were also the women who couldn't get out in New Orleans after Katrina, that were stuck in the super. There's more about Katrina, and in this we learned that sexual assault rates in Mississippi per day rose 300% 1 year after Katrina. This is again tied to the statistic about domestic violence increasing so much like this. But this has to do with women who, again, are displaced, who are in FEMA tent camps or shelters or living with friends or living in cars, who knows where they're living, and they're exposed to all kinds of health threats and violence threats. And this is a very startling statistic. So now we have a few more facts that are added to Katrina, women who can't get out of the city and then they can't get back in, and then the sexual assault. So let's look and see if we can get even closer to home. So I found a really chilling article that brought the issue really home and close to the people that I'm talking about, because here I am in Western Massachusetts, and I found this article from the a UMass publication that said that researchers from UMass have found that we are going to be in the Northeast warming much faster than the rest of the contiguous US. It means that when the rest of the world has reached the 2% limit that it has, we will have been there much longer. So it's very much going to hit us first, which I'm glad to see because it's immediate, not thrilled to see as a human being. So here's what I have for my new factoids. I've added, or my points, that the Northeast is the fastest rising place in the country. So in the next video, I'm going to share what I found that turned me around and gave me a new way of looking at things. So up to now, I've had a lot of really negative and dire research, which is what we come up against, right? And that was kind of discouraging, although I found some stuff that I think would be really useful to use. But then something happened. I actually found some research that gave me reason for hope and that I thought was very, very persuasive. So here's what I found that's so great is that teen girls are leading climate strikes and helping change the face of environmentalism. This article is from the Washington Post, and it goes on to explain that a social scientist has analyzed a climate strike march and the climate activism. And here's what she found, that at this climate strike, the people were overwhelmingly girls. We have a new wave of contention in society that's being led by women. And at the climate strike and a Washington protest, 68% of organizers and 58% of participants identified as female. That is telling us, at least based on this research, that climate change is an activism area where women are leading, which I thought was wonderful news and would have a great role in my little package of research. So here's one more section from this article in the Washington Post. The more diverse crowd at Friday's strike reflects a sea change that has been underway since the Women's March. Women are at the helms of many of the progressive or activist organizations that have sprung up in recent years. It occurred to me, maybe it's the women's marches. Maybe women's marches are bringing women together, putting them connecting them to people they can network with, be inspired with, join up with, learn about movements from, and develop their own sense of leadership. What if that was all happening because of the Women's March? So I'm not sure, I haven't seen research about this, but I'm definitely going to push that interpretation as much as I can until I hear otherwise. So that concludes the research part, and stick with me for the next video and you're going to see how we worked those together. We put them through our magical 3R machine to turn them into cohesive, persuasive, easy R point. Hey everybody, we're back for the finale, the final section of this webinar video on how to become an instant expert on women and climate change. We are going to be putting our points through a fancy easy R machine to make sure that they are easy to receive, remember, and repeat. So as you may remember from past episodes, we have some points, and here's our possible talking points. But these are good, and they have a lot of good things going for them, but we need to shape them up to be a little bit more, as we call it, easier. So remember to be able to, for people to receive something, remember it and repeat it. It must be surprising, right? It's got to surprise them. It must be visual. Absolutely most important thing. They have to be able to make pictures in their mind if they're going to be able to remember anything. It must be simple. We have to boil everything down. It's got to be relatable. So we have to be careful about that when we're talking about international problems. And finally, it's got to feel urgent. So let's take a look at our points and put them through our easy R talking machine and make them all more surprising and urgent, etc. And here we go. Here's our page 1 of talking points that are easy R. Climate change hurts every man, woman, and child in our world and every creature, as we see with fire-threatened koala bears in Australia. But women. So then I go on to women. I want to get those koala bears in there because people have to have a way of entering into that disaster. And koala bears are going to lead us to women and children. The second on the pink sheet has the analogy. That's like losing most of the women. I'm sorry. Let's go to the green one. 80% of people displaced by climate change are women. And then I talk about 83% of poor mothers never being able to return. And then in the pink sticky before it, it said, that's like losing most of the women on your street or church, some of them pregnant. So I've highlighted the things here that I think make them easier are. And usually if I have the word you or your, I will do that. On the blue sticky, we have sexual assault can triple after disasters. And then we have at the bottom of that, the research that shows that that happened in one place. And then climate change is coming to New England first. And then at the bottom, what does that mean for Springfield, Chicopee, and Holyoke? These are towns that are right around us. Our second page is the good news. And I think that people really will like this, especially women. This will be very motivating and very easy and sticky. Women make up most of the leadership in climate activism. Again, that was according to one study. I may find different stuff, but for right now, I'm going to go with that. Women get connected through women's marches. So when you march, your activism builds and you inspire others. Women are key because they get the danger of climate change and more than men, and that they lead climate change activism. And we see that with teen girls. So I wanted to get things that were easy to remember, easy to take in, and easy to repeat. Now, I probably wouldn't use all of these. In fact, I was on an interview show where I just used one of them about women lead climate change. I had to get that in, but I have those things, and I would be picking which 3 I might use for which particular media. So I've given you my examples, but I want you to have a sheet here of tips for easy R talking points. So here are some ways to package your information or facts that make people take it in better. Here's some phrases. Here's what that means for you and me. So when we talk about climate displacing people, and most of those people being women, we're going to say, here's what that means for you and me. Then we say, imagine your neighborhood or church. Now picture losing 80% of your friends and neighbors to climate change. Asking people to imagine something that's in their lives is really effective because they generally do that. Let me give you an analogy. So when you say that to somebody, it's like saying, imagine your neighborhood. You say, let me give you an analogy. Then people know you're going to take care of them in terms of helping them understanding what you say. What most people don't know is that cues that you're going to have surprising information. So I might use that when I say, what most people don't know is women and children are 14 times more likely to die in climate disasters. And then actually what I wanted to do is take that 14 times and find analogies for that. And then finally, something that people love is to have information packaged in a numbered package. So all you have to remember is 3 things. When you can number things, here's what I care about, 3 things. Here's what I want to get you to understand today, 3 things. It makes it eminently more easier for people to take in. And finally, let's go back to that article that we had seen so long ago in the Gender Differences in Public Understanding of Climate Change, and remember what it said. Women tend to be less certain of what they know, even though they have a more accurate understanding of risks and threats from global warming. So what I hope I've done today, and I know I've done it for myself, and I hope I've done it for you, is to tell you some facts, to let you be certain of what you know, and to feel more confident when you talk about it, whether it's on behalf of your Women's March or your organization. Here's one last resource to keep you sane. This was an article in the New York Times recently, How to Stop Freaking Out and Tackle Climate Change. It's a great article. I'm going to tell you one thing that I really enjoyed about it. This part right here. Whoops. This part right here. Focus on systems, not yourself. So don't use your energy to make sure you're not using straws, etc. That stuff is all useful, but the most impactful work is on systems. So it talks about what the author chose to work on. She says, I have chosen to fight against a proposed gas pipeline, etc. That's way more important than any individual things she could work on. So focus on systems, not yourself. So what's next? If you want to get this presentation in PDF form, none of my fancy, crazy animations, email me at Kathy@womenspeakup.org. I want you to go out there and talk about what you care about. You only need to say 1 or 2 things and give an example of it and make it easy R, and you're all set. I want you to steal anything from here you want. I mean, any of the facts, of course, any of the research, please use it. Please copy it. If you want to use my slides, I'd ask you to just give me credit and then tell me what you think or what you know about this issue. And maybe we can keep this presentation going and keep other information in it. Thank you for joining me on this journey. It's been super fun. It started before Christmas when I got sick and I could just sit on the couch, but I could work on this. I taught myself a lot. I feel like, yes, I am an expert on women and climate change in that I can talk about it for a few minutes and help other people to learn a little bit more about it. It was so much fun. I taught myself how to do this screencasting and lots of stuff about slides and video. So thanks so much for sticking with me. I really would love to hear your feedback. Really would love to keep this conversation going. If you want to sign up for my mailing list, you can go right to womenspeakup.org and you get occasional newsletters. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these videos. So if you're interested, do sign up. Thanks everybody and happy marching. Hey everybody, this is a little bonus. I was talking for this whole video about preparing for media interviews, and as it turned out, I did have one. It was a very short one, but I did work in one of my points about women and climate change. So if you want to see that, you can just go to this link. I think you have to copy the link into your browser. I don't think it's a live link.